Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I'm so excited to have the guests that I have on today because they are, people who have been working in the plant-based medicine field for quite a long time. Right now, while a lot of us are at home and, hunkered down, trying to figure out how to live as best a life as we possibly can, we've now, I think, a lot more people have become aware of the fact that some of the medications that we've been taking, especially those that are pharmaceutical medications that are made from chemicals, not necessarily natural products, aren't necessarily the best and safest things that we could be taking. And a lot of people are spending their time doing a little extra research now and recognizing that, there is a world of information out there right now about plant-based medicines, herbs, and things that can help to actually improve your life, especially your well-being. And my guests today are the co-founders of Plant Media Project. It's a boutique marketing company specializing in services for plant medicine and wellness businesses. And they also are the co-hosts of the Vine podcast, which is aimed at providing an insightful look into the world of plant medicine. Gina, Vensel, and Elizabeth Sheldon, thanks so much for joining me today on Let's Be Blunt with Montel.
Thank you for having us.
Much for having us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to just start off by maybe letting you give us, the highlights of your journey and what actually got you both into, number one, into being medical cannabis patients, but also into actually studying beyond just cannabis, the world of naturally occurring plant medicine out there right now. So let's start with you, Elizabeth. What started your journey?
Well, in the beginning, I grew up in a college town, so I definitely smoked cannabis and used mushrooms and LSD. And then as I got married and had children, that was just really not a part of my life. And then Maryland had its medical cannabis program, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I want to get a card. So I did so, and there were so many new products and there are so many refinements. And I was like, okay, I remember why I like this. I remember that it makes me feel better. And so, I will tell you more about how we came to know one another, but it's been a journey, a lifelong journey. And now, like you, we want to be warriors to help others have access. And I think that our medical programs, we don't have our adult program yet, but really let consumers have a safe experience.
Well, I'm going to come back and ask you a little bit about the Maryland program in a minute. And then, Gina, I'm going to also ask you, you're from Pennsylvania. So I'm going to ask you about the Pennsylvania program, because I know that they were both put in place multiple years ago, but they have both gone through crazy hurdles trying to at least, find some sort of administrative process to literally get product to patients. But before we talk about the state, let's talk about you, Gina. So when did you first get involved in cannabis, number one, and then plant-based education for others?
Yeah, so I never really touched the plant. I had asthma growing up. I thought that if I smoked cannabis, it was going to make it worse. So I didn't touch the plant at all until I was in college, and it was really just kind of in a party situation. And then I realized that I felt really good after trying it and became a little bit more habitual with it. And then my asthma completely went away. And I felt so much better. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but I can tell you that, just by, using this plant, my health and wellness just started to feel so much better. I felt better inside my own body. However, it wasn't legal in PA yet. And I was very quiet about my cannabis use. As much as I wanted to tell the world that this plant was so amazing and that I wanted to share my experience, I was scared and I didn't know how I could really get out there and talk about it. So at the time, I was really quiet about it. And then I was like, okay, I started to hear some rumblings about how Pennsylvania could maybe move towards being a medical state. And so I immediately got involved with that movement and wanted to be on the ground and be involved with how this was going to happen. And then when our Act 16 passed, I was able to become a medical patient myself and felt more comfortable to now be able to safely use my voice and share my story and talk about not only my story, but so many of the stories that I learned along the way towards medical being legalized here in Pennsylvania. I mean, the stories really came from the mothers of very sick children. And, when you have a big heart and you're listening to these stories, I mean, even if you don't use the plant yourself, to see that it's helping so many children, I mean, it was really the mama bears, we call them, in Pennsylvania that really helped us get this plant to be able to be available to patients in PA.
I know I came into Pennsylvania and did quite a bit of lobbying myself in Pennsylvania to try to help you move your initiatives forward. This was years ago. As a matter of fact, I think some of the lobbying efforts that we put forth that week with MPP literally got it out of committee and got it into a vote. So I'm glad that we were able to at least help in the state. But one of the things that both of you just said that I find very interesting is that your use started long before your states legalized, which now validates the fact that in your states, there were so many other people, not just you, but so many other people who were also using, which I find, I mean, does that not bother you now today? I mean, when we stop and think about, you look across this great nation of ours, we have 37 states that have already passed, some form of medical or recreational, or we should say adult use programs. Yet, in some ways, people act like this is something that just happened yesterday. And excuse me, I will date myself for just a second in time, but I'm a child. I was born in the 50s, and so I remember the kids older than me in the 60s who were smoking a lot of pot, and I didn't start smoking pot until probably early 70s, 70 itself, and remember distinctly that yes, though we were a small group that used to hide under the bleachers, we were a pretty big group. And, that group grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every single step along the way of my life. Yet right now, when we look to the left and the right, sometimes it seems as if our friends are just afraid to admit what they do. You both find that?
Still there, still very much there. And that's what, we're trying to do with our podcast. And we appreciate all the work that you do. Without having these conversations, those stigmas are going to remain. We have to be out there talking about it to really get people to see why we're so passionate about this and why others should, really feel comfortable with coming out of the closet and saying that they use these plant medicines to heal themselves.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that, our listeners who have tuned in, and earlier, Gina talked about the fact that this for her personally and anecdotally affected her personal health journey. She's not promoting this to tell you that this is going to change your health journey. She's literally giving you some information to say, look it up, read it, investigate it yourself, look at some of the stories that have been out there. And I got to tell you, long before this became vogue, a topic that a lot of people were talking about, I've literally been out there and been public since 2000 and literally testifying and lobbying and, reaching out in states all across this country to make sure that, patients like myself who happen to suffer from MS have access to efficacious medication. And for some of us who have neurological disorders, and, we know that the federal government owns the patent on certain cannabinoids that they have already validated in their patent application how neuroprotective they are. It shocks me, though, that today that people would have the audacity to even open their mouth in a negative way about cannabis. I know that both your states have gone through insane, administrative quagmires trying to move your state voted initiative forward. Talk a little bit about what's going on in Maryland, Elizabeth. I mean, because I know that there was a while. First off, they were going to issue licenses, then they pulled it back, then they're issuing them again, then they pulled it back. It's been kind of this seesaw, right?
Yeah, it's been a seesaw, and we're in session right now, and that session is up March 18th, and my sources believe that adult use will not be passed this session. Who knows? I mean, you know how this goes. But, and I feel that's unfortunate because I think our sister neighbor state, PA, is looking like they're going to do it before us. And you're right. All of these states have had their issues, and I think it's always about the money, Montel. it's always about the money, and how are we going to change that? So
Well, it's always about where the money goes. No, you say it's about the money. It's about who's getting a piece of that money.
right.
I remember back, let's see, who's your former governor who was a former mayor of Baltimore?
I don't know, but we got Hogan now.
Yeah, Hogan now. This is now, I go back almost 20 years. I literally had a meeting in your governor's office with a man who was suffering from seizures and other medical maladies. And we went in, and this was when they first, decided to, I think it was they decriminalized cannabis first in the state of Maryland. And he was very instrumental in speaking directly to the governor about, what his needs were. And I think that's what helped influence, that the passage of that legislation. But, I have had people in Maryland reaching out to me almost every 5 to 6 months, trying to figure out, one, how they can get involved. Two, asking me to come in and do some more lobbying to see if we can change the way the current system is administered. What do you think about your current system in Maryland?
I think that it's flawed. I mean, in a lot of ways, I have to be thankful that we have a system at all. But once you dig in, and the work that we did trying to build these cannabis lifestyle magazines, I got to know a lot of people, and I went to a lot of dispensaries, and it's hard. The money's hard with 280E and the tax code. I do think people, my local dispensaries that I frequent often are like, yeah, we're really busy. The money is coming, but it's not a get rich situation. And I think, in Maryland, there were a group of people that sort of held everything at the top, right? Again, I don't know. I wasn't part of it back then. I was working downtown DC, and I wasn't really paying attention to Maryland, but, I've just learned of these iterations and the lawsuits and the gyrations, and are we going to have the MSOs? Can they come in? Can they buy us? And then all these sort of ways of getting around it, where there are these, management agreements. Sorry, I'm not being very linear, but they're just a lot of things in flux. And I think with adult use, we have to decide, okay, who's going to oversee that? Do the medical licenses, do they get first right of refusal? And how do we roll that out in a safe way? And the social equity thing is, we're going to have some sort of governing body. Nobody's going to do that out of the goodness of their heart. We're human beings, and it's just not going to happen. We're going to have.
Well, we can recognize the fact that this has probably been the only recession-proof industry in America. Almost nationally, most of the cannabis outlets are making more this year and last year through COVID than they did the year before.
Absolutely.
More home delivery, more usage. People are going in and purchasing larger purchases at the same time. And at the same time, we've seen some alcohol use going down, which I think is a good thing. There's no reason why, that shouldn't happen. So, Gina, tell me a little bit about Pennsylvania.
Well, we had something just exciting happen, because unfortunately, up until this point, we've had a lot of really good adult use legalization bills get to our state government. They just, we can't get any bipartisan support. It's all coming from the Democratic side, and none of the Republicans were really giving any support until now. We now have Senator Laughlin from Erie, Pennsylvania, just co-authored a bill with Senator Street out of Philadelphia. And this adult use legalization bill, we're hoping is going to have some of that bipartisan support necessary for us to hopefully move forward. Now, right now in the state, the Department of Health runs the medical program. So under the exact same thing Elizabeth says, will that remain the same? There has been all of this kind of discussion about whether or not, the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board runs all of our spirits and wine, all of those stores, and kind of running it kind of under that kind of model, or potentially even under that, which I really don't think is a good idea. I think that there needs to be a specified, overseeing committee for all the reasons that Elizabeth mentioned. But I know that we, in the Mid-Atlantic region, mean, we all are there together. And this idea of like how it's going to be affected with interstate commerce and with New Jersey just legalizing. And we know that New York just above us. So I think that thinking of things not only just so statewide, but regionally is going to be really important, because I think the governors need to really work together here and say, let's help ensure that we can grow, these. I mean, cannabis is going to make a lot of money for our state and PA. We know that we're in a lot of trouble, and this could really help the tax dollars. And if we can do this in a safe way, and we can write, the laws in a way that will help everyone in Pennsylvania and not just these large multiple state operators, but actually give the farmers and some small business owners a chance to get involved, that would be fantastic. And also, we have a lot of big companies that are coming in and making a lot of money, but there's still a lot of people sitting in jail over the same plant. And I think that needs to be taken care of right away before we talk about anything else.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it when you talk about that corridor right there on the East Coast. Delaware did pass, right? Did they not? Has Delaware passed?
Rhode Island did, I want to say.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, yeah.
Okay, so you've got Rhode Island, you've got New York that's got a medical program, you have New Jersey that now has adult use, you have Pennsylvania that has medical, you have Maryland that has medical. So that's right up that corridor. You can go and actually get anything you want. And you go north of that, you've got Massachusetts, you've got Connecticut, and Maine. So, you do have quite a bit of cannabis along one stretch of the United States, and everybody going to be fighting for their share of that revenue, one way or the other. Is the lobby effort well supported in Pennsylvania?
I think so. I mean, we're trying. We're going to have on April 20th a big march in Harrisburg, for legalization. And the part is now that the bill that is out there is only home grow for patients up to 5 plants. And there's still a lot of lobbying efforts that everyone should have access to be able to grow plants, not just patients. So there's kind of some kind of mix between kind of those that are lobbying about whether or not we want to fully get behind this bill that looks really great otherwise, but without that ability for everyone to home grow.
Right. I guess because if you're talking about adult use and you're saying, but adult use only medically, that's not really adult use.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd thing. And, and I've always been a proponent of the fact that I think majority of people who choose cannabis over alcohol have come to the table for a medical reason anyway, one that they may not even recognize themselves, whether it be just relaxation, anxiety, to feel better. There's an underlying medical reason why people are involved. Both of you are parents, are you not?
Mm-hmm.
We are.
So, I mean, how is it tough for you to be able to explain to kids, this is what mommy does for a living?
So I'll start. I'm quite a bit older than Gina. And so my children when I got my medical card, I was very open that I was getting it, and they were in high school. And now my son's getting ready to graduate from the Naval Academy in Annapolis.
Congratulations.
And my daughter's in New York. And so I'd like to say, they're out on their own. They're just fine, even though their mother uses cannabis. I think that it's different. Gina has, a smaller child. I do believe that we have to, as parents, tell the story, explain that it's medicine, that, when you get older, it may or may not be right for you, but we want your brain to fully form before we start putting other things in there. And, when you have permission from a doctor or from your parents, I mean, I wish that's the way it would go, right? If you have permission from an adult and I don't know what you guys think the age should be, but is it 16, 18? I think 21 is, I think it's got to be 18 or under. So I didn't have that small child, so it's easy for me to say in hindsight what I would do.
How about you, Gina?
Yeah, so my daughter's 7, and I asked her this question, so I wanted to get just straight up. Let's just see what she says. So I said, Giovanna, what is cannabis? And she said, well, mommy, cannabis is a plant that's used for medicine. And, that's just the way I want her to understand it. She knows it's good enough for our dog to take some CBD. And she may only think that all cannabis is CBD at this point, but I'm okay with that. For now. We can start
Sure.
talking more about all the cannabinoids and getting into that when she's ready to learn that. But right now, she knows that mommy's job is about helping people find information about how they can heal. How can they get better?
And is that what brought the two of you? How did the two of you meet? You're in two different states. You're a couple hundred miles apart. So how did you even connect?
I'm gonna let you tell.
You want me to tell it?
Tell, Gina.
I want Gina to tell.
He wants me to tell it. Well, it's really that, Elizabeth and I met because we both wanted a cannabis lifestyle magazine in our hometown. So we started working for the same company and started going on all these, conference trips together, attending all these cannabis conferences, going to all these meetings, and instantly doing all of these things together, we became really good friends. And just from talking to each other about advertising, marketing, we knew that just how different it was between our two states, that even though we were so close and near to one another, that the laws and everything were so different. How we can market and advertise the companies were so different. So we got kind of fascinated with that differentiation and how all the states were really like running their marketing programs so differently. And so when COVID hit, we actually lost our magazines, and it was really a difficult time, as was for so many people that suffered lots of different losses when COVID, really impacted us. We took a step back, and we knew that we wanted to do something. We knew we wanted to pivot and we wanted to work together, but we just kind of thought that maybe after this collective conscious, pretty much a collective trauma, rather, that people are feeling together, dealing with this pandemic, that maybe we could focus our efforts on not just cannabis, but more broader plant medicines, because we know there's a mental health crisis in this country, and we want to make sure that the needs of people are different, and there are different plant and higher medicines that can help people with PTSD and other traumas. So we felt that we could utilize the information that we've learned and the work that we did in cannabis, and now start this new company where we could work on educating and advocacy around all plant medicines, at the same time helping businesses not only in cannabis, but in the psychedelic space safely and compliantly market their companies.
Now you work not only in cannabis, psychedelic space, you also work in like herbs, herbal space also? Like with things like ashwagandha and things like that, rhodiola,
Oh, well, not
shashandra,
the ashwagandha, but ayahuasca.
ayahuasca. You do. Okay. So again, those are psychedelics. But ashwagandha is just an herb that has been around for 4,000 or 5,000 years that man has used to help relax and things like that. You don't work on any of those things.
I have taken ashwagandha, but we are not in that particular space.
Gotcha.
Although
Let's
we
talk
would
about
love to learn more about that and would love to have conversations about those sorts of things on our podcast, because that's what we've really been using our show for, is just like, we want to learn about a lot of this stuff. And we know that there's so many people out there that are curious like we are to really like learn about how we can use, plant-based medicines for all different sorts of reasons and ways that they can help us.
There are so many, it's just like, I don't know if you know, or have you done any study on looking at adaptogen herbs? Have you heard that term? Adaptogen, there are adaptogen vitamins, and that's where the rhodiola, ashwagandha, shashandra, those are non-euphoric plants. This is an herb, like the St. John's wort, kind of an herb, kind of a thing that I say kind of, don't call me now and say, Montel, ashwagandha is not St. John's wort. I know it's not. I'm just saying that it's in that category of those other herbs that are out there that a lot of people don't know a lot about, that have been used medicinally for thousands of years, that actually elicit responses that, now modern day medicine is starting to finally understand. And starting to put into practice, and lots of people are adding them. You'll start to see, if you just watch some of the advertisements right now, you'll see, sleep concoctions that have ashwagandha in it. That and then you'll see things that are for calming and wellness, rhodiola. You'll start to see these terms and go, where did that come from? Well, that's been around for thousands of years. We're just now catching up. But again, you're focusing more on, I shouldn't say euphoric, but more on
higher medicines, we call
higher
them.
medicines. Higher,
that's the term, because ketamine and some of the other things that are helpful aren't necessarily plant, but it's about wellness and well-being, right?
Absolutely. And we also are finding out that, what was old is new again, or what was thought is something different now. I mean,
Mhm.
even some of the drugs in the 50s that were being used for, extremely different things are now recycling and being used for something else now. And we're starting to find out that they are a benefit. But when it comes to plants, when we're looking at the entire spectrum of psychedelics. Now, did you do a lot of writing on psychedelics yourselves?
We do.
This is something that we have been it's become almost like an obsession. We're just like, there's so much to unlock and learn in this space, and just the amount of research that's going on. I mean, Johns Hopkins, right in Elizabeth's backyard. I mean, it's like doing such amazing work, and it just is fascinating to see just the types of responses that these studies are finding. I mean, specifically around psilocybin. I mean, when it's tied to helping people with depression, I mean, these studies are showing that it's 4 times more effective than antidepressants. So, I mean, this is massive news. I mean, any scientist that sees 400%, they're like,
That's good. But now, again, when you say a number like that, and that is being proven in some of the double-blind studies and studies that they are conducting right now, but we have to explain the 400% around that. And then there's, I did a podcast recently where I was able to talk to a person who is very, very, very well steeped in psychedelics, and one of the things is that we're starting to find out that one size doesn't fit all for everyone. So those who are tuned in and listening right now, we're talking about psychedelics. Don't go running out saying I'm going to end my depression if I go, eat a bag of mushrooms. No, 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 no. That's not exactly what's going to happen. We're seeing science that is, studying microdosing. We're seeing science that is studying, pretty large dosages that will elicit, a out of body experience, and then you are basically guided through that entire experience with a professional that helps you interpret that experience, that helps you then come out the other end achieving the result that you wanted to achieve. And that may be, lessening your PTSD, that may be, forgetting a traumatic event that happened in your younger years. But we're also finding that, in the micro dose level, some of the psychotropics literally help to put people who are clinically depressed in a normal state. I find
Listen,
that
I'm working towards that end. I will say, since my postpartum depression 26 years ago, I'm still on the same SSRI. And I asked the doctor today, I said, I want to go off this. It's only 10 milligrams. And she's like, it will affect you.
that's most definitely.
When you're trying to launch these businesses and this is not the time to do it. I'm like, okay, well, when is?
Yeah, especially if you've been on them for as long as you have, but that
26 years.
It's going to take a while for your body to allow your, cells to kind of shake it off a little bit. I mean, I've seen reports that, SSRIs are actually leach into the bone matter in our body. So if they're in your bone, and we know that it takes approximately 15 to 17 years for you to actually completely replace all your bone cell, that means that you are leaching that back out into your blood as you void it over a 17-year period of time. Very
Wow.
interesting. And that's why there's been a lot of research talking about things like heroin and opioids do the same thing. They actually kind of leach into your bone matter. So their bone cells carry traces of that for a long period of time. And most people don't know, we live our lives not knowing that, our cells are replacing themselves constantly. But, our skeletal system takes about 15 to 17 years to replace itself. And that's just in a very, very fine amount of it leaches off, and very fine amount regrows, and very fine amount. Well, as that leaches off, some of that leaches off with a little bit of the remnant of that opioid still in it.
Got it. Well, I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. I'm hoping, that it be, in that 15, 20, 25 year mark. So I don't know. What does one do? Just continue on so that I don't feel the big drop? I definitely going to try ketamine, and the microdosing I'm trying to. I find it a little difficult to work microdosing during the day, but anyway.
Right. Yeah, but again, and you're going to find all over the world there are clinics and places. Or do you guys report on any of those in your podcast? Some of the clinics that are opening up around the world?
Yeah, and we've had some of the folks too, because you touched quickly on, and I want to make sure that I mention this. When we talk about psychedelics and higher medicines, we are talking about them in a medicinal way, and we're talking very much about the therapies that go along with it and the integration post using it. We're centering all of this education around hearing it from the experts themselves and
In a
finding
controlled environment.
And helping share that information, because what could happen, like it did in the 60s, is if it's now just everyone's just doing all these things and not doing the integration, they're going to shut down all of these studies again, and we could find ourselves in the same thing. So we have to be really cautious and careful with these medications. We need to think of them in a very serious way. They can have some amazing results, but it comes with a lot of hard work. I mean, people have to be willing to really dive deep and say, I want to face these, especially if it's tied to trauma or PTSD. I'm going to face these hard traumas, use the plant medicine, do the hard work, and have that integration. And then that can be the tool that it needs, but definitely not just like taking a whole bunch of mushrooms and thinking you're going to go off on your own.
Yeah.
We are not saying that.
We got to make sure people understand that we're talking about, if you want to venture down that path, you're venturing down that path in a controlled setting with a person who is at least licensed or knowledgeable enough about how to take you on that journey, not trying to take you on that journey by yourself.
And we're finding that there are a lot of people that are getting very knowledgeable about this, that are willing to help others, willing to give their time. There's all sorts of integration coaches that we've been speaking to, people that are working on other aspects like breath work to really incorporate all of this. Like, how can you utilize meditation and the plant medicines and healthy foods and really create, your sweet spot? Like, how's that, your diet, your exercise, how can all of that come together? And it's individualized for each person. And we're certainly not going to tell any person how they should live their life. But if we ask a lot of hard questions to a lot of people, we want to give this information and get it out there so that people can really learn it and find out if it can apply to their life. And then hopefully give access to the right types of people that they can contact themselves to get even more information or answers.
How have you guys noticed that COVID has impacted your business? How about you, Elizabeth, in Maryland?
Well, I mean, Maryland is pretty shut down, and we lost our magazines. We just couldn't produce them anymore. So that was 2 years of work in the industry, and without an income. And so it's a bounce back. You have to keep moving one foot in front of the other. But yeah, Maryland, I have to say, is still pretty shut down, and there are a lot of businesses suffering.
Right, that's around our entire country. How about you, Gina?
Well, so it's also pretty shut down. It's starting to slowly open back up. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I also had an events business, but it's just not where it was, I'd say a couple years ago. I mean, some smaller curated events are going to be popping back this year, but, really the business thrived off of large food and drink festivals and massive events that would happen in stadiums and big events. And none of those are really coming back this year. So, coupled with losing the magazine and then having this successful events business for 15 years, pretty much just come to a complete standstill. We looked at each other like, well, we got to do something. I mean, we had built all this momentum. We were working so hard, and quite frankly, in the cannabis space, we feel like if you take your toe out for 1 second, things move so fast, and there's so many things changing that all that work we put into it could be gone. And so we really took that time, where I would have been so busy with events and we were traveling, going to all these conferences, and then all of a sudden it's quiet and everyone's just home on Zoom. And it's like, what do we do? So we started hosting these like free online workshops for people to come and like learn about these plant medicines. We started the podcast. We started doing email newsletters. We started an online Facebook group, just to share information, and just kept ourselves really busy and in tuned in that way. And then during that time, use that as a way to really found this new business and do that. But I'll tell you, I want the events to come back so badly, but I just really don't think that we're going to see at least the large scale concerts and festivals come back in this year, at least not in the way that the industry, the events and entertainment industry need it to be.
Well, I think in some ways, I mean, it kind of seems to me, I think that we may be a little shocked at how much this full year is going to change humanity. I think that when you say, is it going to come back? I don't know if we'll ever come back to where it was before. I think, though there are lots of people who say that they really would love to be back doing the festivals and be back out there in the crowd, but there's a lot of people saying, I don't feel like, now that I think back at it, I didn't have much fun at that anyway. I mean, there are some. I know some people who have said to me, I've heard them say, it's really weird. I used to think back, I'll give you an example. I went to Old Cella, the Coachella event.
Oh, yeah.
Where they had all the old rock bands playing at. And gosh, it must have been 60,000, 70,000 people. And I remember when I left that, after being there for a whole weekend and attending at least 3 concerts and spending time in his big house with a whole bunch of other friends and family. It was probably about 20 people living together in this big compound, eating dinners and, hanging out together. And it took me a week to recover from, number one, being out on this field where all this dirt was being kicked up by people walking and didn't realize, how much I was breathing in, even though I had on face mask and was, eye covers. It took me a week to recover. And when it was all over, I said, I really didn't have that much fun. To be absolutely honest with you, I thought I did at the time, but now that I look back at it, really wasn't that much fun. So that's something I'm not going to again. I'm done. That's it. I don't need that. Do I need to go to a movie theater? Hell yeah. Would I like to go to a concert? Maybe one of a more intimate setting. I'm not necessarily. My last big concert was, I think it was Aretha Franklin, and I was somewhere midway, on the floor. I didn't want to sit. I hate sitting up too close anyway because I just don't want to be blasted by the sound. But I remember I was maybe in the theater. This was a Radio City Music Hall, and in the middle of the theater, I thought about it, and I thought, I really wish I had seen her in a small blues club instead. So I don't know. Maybe it's because it'd be my age. I don't think so, because I know people of multi-generations who have said the same thing, that now that they have had to reassess what fun is, some of those things and the ways that we presented it weren't as much fun as we thought. So now maybe it's up to us to try to figure out what the new version of fun is, right?
I agree. And I think it's going to be small and curated, for at least for now, just like you said, I imagined, that jazz club, that intimate setting, and that's where I want to be. I don't know if I, even as an events producer, want to be a part of some of those massive ones. I mean, the money's much better in the massive ones, I'll tell you. But at the end of the day, I was at the point last year looking at how am I supposed to keep my staff safe? We're going to be, at a food festival. How are people going to take their masks down to eat I looked up all the different plans. I looked at everything, and it just felt unsafe, and it didn't feel good in my heart. And I had to say, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And then, of course, the states just started shutting everything down pretty much at that point. And so it really wasn't up to any of the producers or anybody. Everything shut down. So I think that people are going to be definitely yearning for community and yearning for ways to get together. But I think it's going to look different, and it's going to be more curated. Like if you have a certain thing that you love, like if we're talking about cannabis, and maybe there's like an event that's, an artist and a musician in a setting with like a cannabis speaker, and it's all kind of curate the people that would be there all in the same industry, or they're there for the same reasons, because the big massive, I agree. I think it's going to look different after this.
With that, on that note, think in terms of cannabis itself. Now, a year ago, you probably would not have hesitated to go to a friend's house and they spark up a joint, pass it to you, and you take it and but nobody's passing joints between each other anymore. Mm. People are smoking their own and taking the joint out and giving that joint to their friend and say, you can have that one, I'll do this one. So, and this is a very social, event. I mean, we think about sharing cannabis. Cannabis has always been something that, to go back to the peace pipes, which was peyote, but still go back to peace pipes, and people pass the pipe from one to another. I don't see that happening as much anymore. Even if, tomorrow we say that we're at herd immunity.
I
I think
think
you're
that
right.
I think you're right too. I really do. And I know that that's a huge industry too. I mean, that pretty much like all the cannabis consumption events that we're starting in the adult use legal states. I mean, we were at one about a year ago in Palm Springs that was incredible and it was great. It is community. All the brands know one another. That's where business deals happen. That's, where those relationships are made and, where people meet their future investors. I mean, those are the parties and the gatherings that really matter to the industry. And so I did see that MJ BizCon announced that they are coming back in Vegas in October. So, there's an event that looks like 5 football fields worth of booths. I mean, it's the most massive, cannabis conference. What's that going to look like? Will people really go? Will all the amount of brands participate? It's going to be, will we go? I don't know.
Right.
It's just like, it's going to be interesting to see, how this all, changes.
And just a quick thought. I mean, here I'm talking to two ladies in this industry, but and Elizabeth, you brought it up earlier when you mentioned the equity program in Maryland. And we've noticed that the equity programs across the country have been really just, I think, lip service rather than true equity programs, because we know that, I guess, women make up less than 7-8% of this entire industry. People of color make up less than 10% of this entire industry. Um, What do you think is going to help either, number one, change, or how are we going to improve women's representation in the cannabis industry?
I think, unfortunately, because I thought about this too, about being old, like they're going to have to be some mandates. I just, I don't like big government, but we're not doing it on our own. We're going to have to say, you know what? You're going to have people that are X number of people that are 65 and older that work for you. And you're going to have X number of women, X number of people of color. I don't know. Tell me a better way.
Do you guys have a lot of women reaching out to you, asking you for information or help on how to get involved?
I think we've connected with a lot of women. I think that women tend to, in this industry, there's not as many as you said. So we're involved in a lot of these. I mean, I'm Facebook groups, Clubhouse chats. There's definitely a lot of women that are in the industry. They're just not in leadership positions. They haven't been able to get to the top of the industry. And so what I think is, it's uncomfortable to sit and have any conversation with a bunch of, executives that want to talk about diversity and inclusion and have no women or people of color in the room. So, I mean, it has to really, it's, look to the people that are on your staffs, look to the people in your communities that are really leaders. They're just not being given the opportunity to be at the top and have a seat at the table to make these decisions. So I would personally like to see that more of these companies that are coming up with these, social media campaigns to say how much they care about diversity and inclusion, to admit how many people they actually have on their board of directors or in sitting at the top of their company that are making the most money at their company. How many of those are actually women or people of color? And that's what I'm seeing very limited of. So it's great that people are getting behind and they're creating these campaigns, and we want there to be more discussion about it. It's something that we need to change, but it shouldn't just be some marketing ploy. It should be something that companies are really taking an internal look on and trying to do something about.
As far as talking about marketing play, but what's next for Plant Media Project? What's next for the two of you?
Well, we hope that we'll be continuing to explore how this psychedelics space is going to just unfold, especially as more people are being open to trying some alternative medicines, like how MAPS has the MDMA trials right now, and psilocybin getting so much attention. So I think we really plan on tapping in and making sure that we're educating people and bringing in as many of the experts in the psychedelics field, and really keeping our eye on how adult use legalization is not only going to unfold in our respective states, but really what this could look like nationwide, and how that's going to impact not only all of the businesses, but how it can impact patients as well.
And I think too, Montel, as two women, we, different ages, come at it differently. It's like, okay, we're pretty normal people in the eye of society. I think it's like, we have children. We've had to put food on the table and make money, and hey, it's not so scary. It's a conversation that we should all have. And like you said, it's connecting through cannabis is such a wonderful experience with someone, right? When you find out, oh, somebody else, okay, let's go share this or whatever. I'll give you one and I'll have mine. That, yeah, it makes the world a more mellow place. When I did some work with universities, they'd say, you know, we'd much rather deal with kids that are high rather than kids that are drinking, you know? Anyway, there is this piece about this plant and the way it brings us all together. And I mean, that's the part I love about it. I also, you know, Gina and I say to people who want to get into it, you know, make sure you know who you're getting in bed with, because there are a lot of smoke and mirrors. I've never seen so many smoke and mirrors in my entire career, and I've worked in politics.
Well, speaking of politics, let's talk a little bit about that for just a second. I mean, you know, you have a president who's been elected now, and a vice president who both campaigned on this idea of, you know, one of the first things that they were going to do when they get in office is figure out how to decriminalize. What do you think about the whole idea of decriminalization rather than descheduling first? And number two, what do you really think that this administration is going to do? Because now it's been 3 months and you have not heard a peep, not a peep. Let's remember that under the vice president, when they were the attorney general, arrests were at its highest in California, especially for people of color when it came to cannabis. So, and we also remember that this president, 6 months before elected, came out of his mouth that cannabis was still a gateway drug. Excuse me. So what do you think politically we may see in the next year?
I was going to ask you later, does everyone have to die in this generation for these things to change? Is that what it is? Because it just seems to be at a stalemate. There's so much talk and very little action. And I really appreciate hearing from, you know, an industry expert like you, like, okay, yeah, we wanted to get you in office, but where are you now, people? You know, that's important to ask those questions. Okay.
Well, that's part of the problem, though. Part of the problem is that, you know, those who need to ask the question don't hold those accountable for what they had to say. Right. You know, and we're faced with, you know, this dire chasm that's been, you know, developed in this nation between one side and the other side, and we never really try to address the issue at hand. And the true issue at hand is the fact that, you know, we've got a large percentage of this country who feel disenfranchised for no reason whatsoever. Let's remember, on the 6th of February, those who busted the doors and kicked in windows at the Capitol were carrying joints. One of the things that one of the police officers said, they had never smelled that much cannabis even at a rock concert.
Is that right? I did not know that.
A lot of those people were smoking, and nobody's talking about that at all. And, you know, also, we don't even hold, you know, Hollywood accountable.
No, we don't. And you know what? You're exactly right. We don't. And when are we going to? Aren't we a government about the people, for the people, and the people have spoken? I just, yeah, the disconnect. It's like my father said to me when I went to work in politics. He's like, okay, it's your generation's turn. And I'm like, okay, I did the best I could do. Now, is it the next generation's turn? Like, when are these things going to change? Do people just have to literally, including myself, maybe do we have to be gone for there to be change?
I'm hoping that, you know, what you guys are doing and what I'm trying to do, and that's messaging. I think one of the biggest reasons why we are where we are right now is because of lack of information. Unfortunately, we live in a time when, you know, science is less believed than anything else. I mean, when you think about this president who got in office who said that we're going to let the science lead the way. Really? You're going to let the science lead the way? Let the science lead the way when it comes to cannabis. Let the science lead the way when it comes to, you know, the other plant-based medicines that we talked about. Science is now starting to prove that the efficaciousness of cannabis in a myriad of illnesses, and we're also proving, you know, the same thing when it comes to psychedelics. and yet they won't listen to that science. That science that for some reason is going to go right over the head. So
I appreciate you calling out. Please keep calling it out, because I don't know what it will take. It's like, I mean, I guess some people say we get the government we deserve. We elected these officials, but I think some act on their own accord, not in accordance to what their constituents want, at least around cannabis anyway.
Well, I think, but one of the biggest problems with cannabis is that too many of the constituents keep their mouths shut.
Right.
You still have too many people afraid to say, I do.
Well, yeah.
And if you do, you do.
Your job. Right. Because, I mean, it's because of the stigma. You're right. I figure at this point, nobody can hurt me anymore.
Well, I figure my thought is that, the reason why we've had so many bills pass across this country is because, we finally do have a generation in office that remembers, hey, I remember my friend Steve, who was smoking a joint under the bleachers back in 1970, and he just ran a successful business for 40 years. So those are the people that are now starting in legislation that can actually make some decisions, but we just need more of them to start making the right decision.
We do.
And not just tweet about it and try to do a hashtag about it and pretend like you actually care, because people remember. I mean, as soon as the administration flip-flops on, their topics on this, I mean, the entire cannabis industry already knows it. It's already been out there. We see what's going on. And, I will give it that little tiny bit of the benefit of the doubt that I know that we're trying to roll out these vaccines right now, and that maybe that can take priority. I know that some, pushback has been like, let's worry about that first. But that was, I think, 100-day plan, right? So day 101, let's have cannabis be at the top of that agenda.
Absolutely. And, though we can, again, that holds that weird saying about we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We do know that there's recent research that's just come out that's proven that, cannabis has an anti-inflammatory effect for the COVID virus in the lungs. This has now been proven through, a peer-reviewed, double-blind study, written document. Yet nobody's talking about that. We're all hunkered down at home watching Netflix and watching Hulu and watching Prime. But tell me, what Prime, Hulu, or Netflix show do you see when people come on? The star comes in, walks in the door, and grabs a joint, lights it up, and just sits down on the couch and doesn't say anything about it? You see them all come in and pour a large shot glass of some brown liquor, and everybody's walking around banging down brown liquor, and nobody says anything about it. So why can't we include these images that are truthful images of the way people are living?
Absolutely.
I love that. I
cannabis has been deemed essential. I always keep thinking this was a pandemic. It's now deemed essential business.
Correct. Come on now.
That.
That right there by itself is one of the biggest statements made by a government, any government, about cannabis, yet no one echoes it. And all the states that have seen their share of tax revenue go up, none of them are applauding where it's coming from.
Right.
So, yeah. So, ladies, I can't say thank you enough for being a part of Let's Be Blunt today. The Vine, tell people where they got to go to get the Vine, make sure.
Yeah, you can follow us at plantmediaproject.com to learn all about our podcast. We have lots of information on there, our upcoming events, and you can sign up for our newsletter to learn more.
Okay. And the Vine is on all the podcasting services?
Yep.
Well, there you go. So I'm going to make sure people reach out and, find Gina Vensel and Elizabeth Sheldon, find the two of you, make sure that keep doing the good work that you're doing. And anytime you want to home and you want to come back here to Let's Be Blunt, you're both invited together or individually. Whichever way you do it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for all that you do for the community and for these honest discussions and for bringing people together. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. We're out of time. So make sure you tune into the next edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.